woman.
Oh my gosh, but you will never be a woman because you are a man and you were born a man. And in 100 years, when your bones are found underground, they'll do an analysis and say, this was a male, and you will be buried with your birth name. You will never be a woman. Although drag queens don't even want to be women, they're just pretend to be for fun. And that's why there's like an internal dispute between drag queens and trans people. But you don't have to worry about these complicated topics here because this is a fun show. Punching Left. Welcome, everybody. I'm your host, AJ Wilms, joined here with Mike Lauber. Glad you guys could make it here today. And Mike, what on earth was that video?
I don't even know at this point. Like, was that one of the Taco Bell drag queens, or was that like a weird-looking gay bar?
Pizza Hut drag queens?
Yeah, yeah. And, well, this is what I don't understand. Like, it's obviously not a real woman. It's a mockery. Like, why isn't this just treated the same way as blackface?
Yeah, and it's like I mean, they're doing this to like mock women too, and
Yeah.
that's why they exaggerate everything. They have like the super long nails and the super long eyelashes and the super overdone makeup and the super crazy hair. It's all like a gross super exaggeration or over exaggeration of what a woman is.
Yeah, it's just a disgusting caricature, is what it is.
Yeah.
I mean, I used to like before all this stuff happened. I used to just laugh at them because they all look like a bunch of cartoon characters. But now that they are like actively trying to get children to come to these events, and it's literally like their grooming recruiter tool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's just gotten up to that next level of being sick.
Yeah, well, and you saw in that video there was like a little kid who was like giving the drag queen money for dancing. It's like, whoa, this is not a country that like people are going to tolerate living in.
Maybe that was money to go away.
Yeah, could you imagine? Here's my money, please leave me
Yeah,
alone.
just leave
Go
me alone.
away.
Oh, I mean, that's how I treat the Jehovah's Witnesses.
Just give them money. Hey, get lost, buddies.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's sad because it's like there is obviously a directed attack on children, and they're trying to normalize this to little kids because anyone who has like a fully developed brain would look at a drag queen and be like, you're disgusting, gross, goodbye. I just remembered now, speaking of people who don't have developed brains who like drag queens, Nancy Pelosi was on this drag queen show and was like, oh, you guys are doing the Lord's work. You're wonderful. Oh, God bless you. And it's like the most disturbing minute and a half long video I've ever seen where
Yeah.
Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, is so out of place, surrounded by these drag queens talking about politics. But maybe we'll have that video for next show because it's really odd. So anyways, people with underdeveloped brains are receptive to these weird, strange messages, which is why they target children who have developing brains so they can indoctrinate them while they still don't know any better.
Yeah, with Nancy Pelosi, maybe it was the alcohol poisoning. I don't know. But yeah, she said, this is what makes America great. Talking about what was she on, like RuPaul's Drag Race?
Right.
I can't
Yes,
remember
yeah. And that's what she said. This is what makes America great. What?
Yeah, I'm sure our founding fathers, when they were separating from Great Britain, this is exactly what they envisioned in their head. It was, 200 years from now, I hope we'll have a bunch of men pretending to be women dancing on a show that'll be somehow shown to the entire country and the entire world. And then,
Could you imagine? Could you imagine George Washington or like Alexander Hamilton going out with a bunch of drag queens? Like, you guys are the reason I'm fighting. You guys are the reason when I take off my helmet and I look into the inside and see the picture, it's just you guys, a bunch of drag queens dancing for kids. That's why we're fighting here.
oh, I can see it now because, it wouldn't be a picture. It'd be like a little tiny painting of drag queens inside their helmet.
Yeah, exactly. Like a self-portrait or something of
Yeah,
these
yeah.
drag queens. Well, I mean, and that's like the whole point is like, this is not something the founding fathers intended for this nation. This is completely gross and perverse. I mean, the founding fathers, I think every single one of them advocated for like sodomy to be illegal or punishable by death. And it's something like in George Washington's like home state or whatever, or home colony or whatever. It was like, homosexuality was punished by death, and same with like lesbianism and all this other stuff. And yet we pretend like the founding fathers would have said like, oh no, like, indoctrinating children to have, sex with grown men, like that's totally normal. Drag queens, yeah, that's allowed. Public displays of like pornography or like going out nude, like that person basically was totally
Yeah.
okay. Women couldn't wear pants for most of American history because it was seen as too controversial. Okay. They weren't cool with things like what are going on today.
So I heard a leftist arguing that in a lot of states, there were no laws regarding like homosexuality or anything else early on, like the obvious response to that is because normal society wouldn't have accepted it. Like the
Yeah,
government didn't think this was something that was even possible that would become like widespread. They definitely didn't think there'd be like drag queen story hour at public libraries because they just
right.
assumed that, the town would don their pitchforks and torches and they'd have a good old fashioned witch burning.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So, and that's the thing. It's like maybe nominally legal for a certain period of time until it became, quote unquote, socially acceptable, or people started doing it, and people are like, "Well, that's gross. Let's make some laws against this."
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I'm sure it didn't even cross their mind because it was the furthest thing possible as far as most of them were concerned. That wasn't in the realm of
Yeah.
possibilities.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, why would it be? But it's interesting because if people are simply born gay and there's no external factors whatsoever, there's absolutely nothing that can happen in your life to contribute to you living that lifestyle. You would think that the percentage back then would be identical to today, and there would be just as many gay, transgender, asexual, incel, non-binary, all the LGBTQ plus people back then as there are today. But that's not the case. Is like, and people will say, "Oh, well, they were just hiding." It's like 20% of Gen Zers identify as gay. I don't think 20% of all people at the founding were hiding the fact they were gay. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
certainly not. And, for that argument too, like it has been fairly consistent, even across different societies and countries, that when they've surveyed up until recently, it was somewhere between 1.2 and 2.2% of the general population was not straight and somewhere on the LGBTQ rainbow. And then all of a
Hmm.
sudden, over the last couple of years, we've seen this giant spike up
Right.
where, went to 4% on average, then 10% on average. And now with the Gen Z, like you said, it's a hair over 20%. I think it's 20.8%. And a couple different
Yeah.
surveys actually hit the same number in the US.
It's insane. And it's again interesting because in places like, for example, in North Korea, there's no laws against being gay. Not that that's like acceptable there, but it's just like it just doesn't come up. And again, if people are simply born gay and like 2% of the entire Earth population is gay, then why isn't like 2% of North Korea, like 1 in 50 people in a gay relationship there? It's like basically zero there, but there's no laws against it. There's no education about it. It's just people living naturally, and yet they don't come to that conclusion, which would imply that maybe the mass indoctrination of children on these topics, like in America, contributes in some way to how they identify later in life.
Yeah. I mean, maybe there is a correlation between grooming children and them choosing this lifestyle.
Who knows? Yeah, maybe, right? Well, and it's not just it's not just like in private companies that are sponsoring these like drag events and stuff we saw at that restaurant in the opening video, but it's also governments. And Mike, if you could pull up the police in, where is it, Miami, I believe.
Yeah.
We have a Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I'll introduce you to what would we call this Law and Order Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, this is quite disturbing here. Do you have
Oh,
the
yep.
clip here?
Here we go. Sorry, I hit the wrong button.
So this right here is the LGBTQ plus police car, and this is in, I believe it was Miami. The video is frozen here, but it shows a police car that is totally decked out in rainbows, and it's like, why on earth are we spending so much money on decorating these police cars
It's
rainbow
real.
colors? Here's the video.
It's really fucking
And it
real.
says pride on it. And it's like, look, I posted a video about this on like TikTok. People were like, "Oh, he's just mad because a car has colors on it." It's like, no, I'm mad because it's like a needless way to spend money, and it's promoting something gross and degenerate. And again, using my money to do so, we're
Yeah.
defunding the police, but then funding like the painting of their police cars.
Yeah, and it really is sick. It is nothing but virtue signaling. We've seen this for a long time over in the UK, especially in London. I mean, don't they have a whole like gay division of their police department now?
Yeah, and in England they have a lot of these gay police cars too.
Yeah. How bad would you feel if you were like the rookie officer and this is what you got assigned on your first day and you weren't some part of the
Yeah,
spectrum?
I know, and they probably do that. Like, okay, who's taking the gay car? Make the new guy. He has to drive in the fagmobile there.
Yeah, is that when you just hope they send you to the no-go zone so that you just get eliminated and don't have to worry about it again?
Yeah, maybe. And it's also here we can see it's also like within our education system, not just with the police, but our education system is now encouraging, such as in the case as the Michigan Attorney General, calling for drag queen story hour in every school because it will make everything better.
Yeah, it's not just the police trying to indoctrinate you. The Michigan AG believes that they need a drag queen for every school. So is this apparently is going to become a commonplace event that they're just going to bring them in to read to the children and K through 4 every single day. Um, it, but I do want to point out, like, our side is not good about pushing back, except for a handful of people. And again,
Yeah.
Marjorie Taylor Greene's leading the way. Same day this happened, she tried to introduce a bill into the House that will make it illegal for drag queens to proselytize children, make it illegal for children to attend these performances.
Yeah, and I mean it's really sad that Republicans saying, "Hey, don't groom children, don't allow monsters like you can see right here into our schools to indoctrinate our children." It's sad that to say that is now like a right-wing victory. And it's almost like with the issue of abortion, like whenever someone who's apolitical is like, "Oh yeah, abortion is like killing a baby. That's messed up." We're all like, "Yes, based conservative, they're the best." And it's like, well, that should just be like a normal position to have, though. Like everyone in the country should at a baseline say, yeah, abortion is wrong, or like grooming kids is evil. And unfortunately, because the Republicans historically have been so crappy at like holding back the blue tide, the Democrats have steamrolled us all the way to the point where even saying don't groom kids is seen as a victory for us. So good on MTG, because she is like the only person who's actually trying to do something to stop this. But like there needs to be a lot more done, especially from the Republican Party, to push back against these things.
And I really don't understand it, because all polling tells you this is an issue that there is widespread support on, both among conservatives and independents. It doesn't pull anywhere near to 50% support among either group. I mean, I think among Republican voters, almost 90% are against it. Like, I don't know what's wrong with these other 10%, or it could be how they're framing the question. And even with independents, 70% roughly, depending on the poll, and I've seen as high as 76%, don't want anything to do with this. They don't think children should be anywhere near these groomer lunatics.
Yeah, and I mean they shouldn't be. And normal people do understand that like having, again, like if you take a look into this person's eyes, or their horns or whatever those
Yeah.
are on their head, and you'll realize, this is not someone who should be indoctrinating our children with education. This is someone who, in fact, should be like, it should be the opposite. We should be telling our children never talk to a person who looks like this in your life.
Well, judging by some of the reactions I've seen, I think some of the kids know that they instinctively cry and try to run away when they see these, monsters trying to.
Well, it's terrifying. Like, how on earth could a kid look at that and not be scared? That is terrifying.
Well, yeah, and like this one here, and the critics would say this is a poor choice. This is somebody that's trying to be a demon, not a woman. But why is there always that connection too? Because like she's not the only one. We could probably find 10 more videos in the next 5 minutes with the trans whatever that says they're a demon self. Like there was that video circulating around. We might have even used that one. I can't remember.
Yeah, well, and the thing is like you got to understand for kids too. It's like imagine they're like in bed and they're sleeping and they hear a loud noise downstairs or something, and then like the woman on the left like opens their bedroom door and is like, "Hey, it's okay." And it's like, "Oh, maybe it's a cop, maybe it's one of my mom's friends." It's there's a little bit of like not fear, but then imagine if this one came into your room and it's like, "Hey there, buddy, everything's okay." You'd be like, "Ah, that's terrifying." Anyone would say that. I would say that if that dude like peeked into my room.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry, Timmy. There's just a nice man downstairs that wants to read you a bedtime story. Okay.
Yeah, like it's just like objectively terrifying. And look, I mean, people will say, "Oh, you guys are cherry picking like that photo." That is literally someone reading a story to kids. Like there's no cherry picking when that is literally what is happening. It's not a drag queen we found on like, Santa Monica Boulevard or whatever. And we're like, "Oh, there we go. There's some freak. Let's pretend they're reading stories to kids." Now, this is a real life example of an American drag queen story hour drag queen right here. And
Yeah.
it's absolutely terrifying.
Yeah, and honestly, I could have pulled pictures that are even worse than this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this just happened to be, whoops, this just happened to be one that's handy. Sorry about that. I bumped a button. This just happened to be one that was handy and available, and I fit that slide. But I saw another picture with a bunch of like bearded guys in dresses reading to children, and another one, a creepy one with same like demon-looking people doing a puppet show for children at this one wasn't at a library. It might have been at a park. I'm sorry, I don't remember where it was.
And it makes me wonder, like, are these people a part of like the occult or something where they like get off on being like satanic and stuff, like, because there's some groups out there who, whether you know it or not, they participate in these very like occultist activities, for example, like Freemasonry, there's a lot of really weird satanic undertones that like your normal member is going to join and be like, I'm just here to go to barbecues and get a better job. But like if you actually look deeper into it, you'll notice like there's some really messed up stuff underneath the surface. And it's like, is that the same for the drag queen stuff where it's like at first it's like a mentally ill guy who's like, I want to dress up like a woman, I want attention, I'm a performer. But then underneath that, it's like you have people like, no, dress up like a demon, yeah, go talk to those little kids. And it's this like satanic occultist undertone. Do you think that's what it is?
Yeah, I do think there's a connection to it that way. Um, and you know, I guess this is kind of biased. I'm kind of like just thinking about people I know in real life, but a lot of the same people I knew like in, you know, high school or whatever that were in that like part of the like goth or whatever movement. That's who ends
Right.
up being like gay later in life or whatever. They did have this like initial attraction to things that were like a satanic or at the very least outside of normal Christian morals.
Right.
They
Yeah.
were, you know,
Yeah,
into
I know what you're talking about. I don't know the word to put on it, but I know
yeah,
exactly what you mean. That kind of like
yeah,
that outside of the realm of normalness or whatever.
yeah. Like they weren't like outright like Satanists or anything, but you know, maybe they were into like being a Wiccan or whatever else was trendy
Yeah,
into like New
right.
Age religion. And it
Or
is
it's like
almost
these like the death metal bands, death metal? Is that what it's called? You know, like the people who like do all the demon guitar play. I sound like some old boomer here
that's
in like the
hilarious.
1960s. Like that's rock and roll music. You know what I'm talking about? Like Black Sabbath and these people who have like the pentagram behind them, and it's like I know you guys aren't like practicing Satanists, but like why do you appeal to all these Satanists? Like why do you use this imagery and stuff?
Yeah, and I do get that like sometimes like bands at least they've like used that as a selling tool. Like are
Right.
you familiar with like Alice Cooper and that whole story with him?
No.
Yeah, like he was kind of like the original back in the 70s original like shock rocker. And you know, now he's a born again Christian and you know he
Hmm.
came out later and said, "Yes, this was literally like an act from our record label. They wanted us to like
Right.
take on this persona
Hmm.
because it would help them to you know, sell music, book shows and everything else." But
Interesting. Do you know
they
what record label it was?
no, I don't actually, but
Yeah, because a lot of these record labels are run by these like satanic people, and it's like rap music. Like rap music is a perfect example of this, where they like these managers and producers of these big labels will go out and find some like super hood ghetto black guy and be like, "Hey, buddy," you know, they don't find like Will Smith. They find like the most like criminal, like you know, ghetto black guy they can in Compton. And they're like, "Hey there, buddy, you know, we're gonna give you $1 million to make these hip, cool CDs about murdering people and selling drugs. How's that sound?" And it's like the American public never was like open to these ideas. It was like these record producers and these record label owners who went out and found these like really bad influences and then gave them millions to make them successful.
yeah, and actually some of that's kind of interesting too. So a lot of the ones that were like that like were former dealers or whatever, like the reason they got onto labels and blew up so big is they already had a distribution network. And
Really?
no, seriously, like so they used to I used to was involved somewhat in the music business a while back, and so they used to use something called sound scans. They could tell how many albums you sold on your own. They knew that if this individual sold, say, 10,000 records, that meant the label with national distribution would be able to sell close to 1 million.
Hmm.
So they would have these guys that were like, you know, in the drug business or whatever. They say, again, I have this wide distribution network, all these people working under them, slinging albums, and all of a sudden they see the sales racking up on SoundScan, all these CDs moving. And then that's how they would garner interest. So
It's
even though
funny.
some of them were
You
like
just
no
like
talent.
tape the mixtape on top of the drugs you're selling or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. It's free. It's free with your order of $25 worth of rocks.
Yeah, exactly.
But
Well, that's
wait, there's
interesting.
more.
And but yeah, I mean, and I think it's the same though with like the with the metal bands and stuff. A lot of the times these producers are like, "Ooh, do this satanic stuff, you'll get attention." And maybe some of it is kind of like I wouldn't want to say like harmless, but just like business oriented, where they're like, you know, controversy sells. So just do something controversial. You know, go do like you know, be naked on your album cover, that'll get views. Be satanic on your album cover, that'll get a lot of views. But I also think that some of this is like ideologically motivated, where they're like, you know, we want America to be like a degenerate, gross country. So let's push that into the culture because we have the ability to do so.
Yeah, and I really think that's a lot of it. I do think it's also the controversy sells, and that's where a lot of it comes from. They know that it'll get media attention, and you know, any publicity is good publicity. Um, So
But
they
see,
know.
wouldn't like the most controversial thing today though be like the Westboro Baptist Church album or something like that? Like, why am I not like a million? Why aren't record labels coming to me and signing me and having like some Christian fundamentalist, hymn album coming out? Because wouldn't that be more controversial today than like rap music or like all this other stuff they're putting out?
You've got a good point there, but I think then it would be like it'd be viewed as a pushback towards what was normal and acceptable. So then people would come
Maybe,
out against it. I don't
yeah.
know.
Like
Maybe we
what's
should just
Paul
try this
Joseph?
idea.
Because I think Paul Joseph Watson and I think several other people, they always say like, what is it? Conservatism is the new counterculture. Like now the big controversial stuff, it's all just being like conservative. Like I just want to have kids in a household and a normal family.
Well, there is a certain amount of truth to that too, because
Yeah,
even if you look at the original like counterculture movement in the '60s, early on there was a lot of pushback to it from the mainstream. They didn't want anything to do with it. I mean, you remember like the Beatles getting arrested for us when they were staying in a hotel because they had women fans at the hotel, and things like that. So like the culture was pushing back against some of this stuff, including things that were relatively innocuous.
right.
Um, but yeah, sorry, I was going somewhere with that, and then I lost my train of thought.
Well, I mean, we see in all the upper echelons of society these people determining what news and information that we're going to be given, and whether it's through culture and media, or whether it's through like as in media as in Hollywood, movies and stuff, or whether it's through media as in like mass media like press, and whether it's newspapers or CNN or MSNBC or ABC or whatever. In all of these areas, we have these institutions controlled by people who hate us, these globalists who continuously push this idea of like moral relativism and national relativism. Like there's no such thing as nations. We don't need borders. We're all one people. We all should speak one language, use one currency, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm very opposed to that as someone who's more nationalistic in his mindset.
Yeah, agreed. And to get kind of back on track here a little bit, like it's not just like AGs in Michigan that are pushing this nonsense and this garbage. Like it's coming straight from the top. Biden yesterday in a speech signed an executive order advancing the LGBTQI plus equity for Pride Month. So again, they're like forget that the price of gas is up 336% so far this year since he took office. You can forget that the stock market's below where it was when he was sworn in. You can forget fuel prices have more than doubled. But we got to remember the gay trans kids, and we got to push for equity in advancing their agenda.
It's crazy. It's like we're watching like the fall of Rome, where it's kind of like that meme where the whole like house is on fire, and it's like the dog with the coffee cup, and he's like, everything is okay. It's like that now in America. It's like it was like that in Rome, where it's like everything is collapsing, and everyone's like, our entire empire is collapsing, right? And then like the emperors and like the republics, like everything's okay. We're just like deified another person. It's awesome. And in America, we don't deify people to be gods, but we certainly act as if these transgender people and gay people in America are gods, and we have our own little ritualistic worship ceremonies for them, like Biden's doing here. And it's like, hey, dude, have you not noticed what's happening in the rest of the country here? This should not be the top priority for the president of the United States of America.
Well, I mean, look at it this way too. Like this guy's inability to read the room is just unbelievable. So, like, this is the statement he made while signing this executive order: hateful, discriminatory laws that target children are out of line with where the American people are. Oh, sorry, that wasn't him. That was a senior White House official, said according to The Hill. So, at the same point where we do finally have this pushback with the drag queen lunches and story hours and everything else, they're saying they want to put laws in place to protect these events and encourage children to go.
Yeah, you're right. It is totally tone deaf, and I have no idea what the Biden administration like. I don't know what kind of paint they're huffing, but like, sign me up for some, because man, these guys are like going way off the rails. They have no idea what's happening in reality, though I can't blame them, because who wants to live in this reality we have in America today? But the tone deafness of like that statement of like, we need to protect children by letting them go to drag queen events undisturbed. Like, what on earth?
Yeah. And like when I see things like this from the Biden administration, that's when I kind of start to wonder, maybe there isn't a puppet master pulling his strings. Maybe it really is just the dementia and the brainworms talking.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a mixture of both. I think they have to let him have some leadway so the American public is reminded, like, oh, right, this is just some senile guy. Not a big deal.
Yeah, because like again, like if you wanted to, I mean, his approval numbers right now are again, they just hit another all-time low. Depending on which poll you read, he's somewhere between 36 and 39% approval. Um, I think his it's 57 to 58% are against him. They think he's doing a terrible job right now, leading the country in the wrong direction. It's like these are
Wow.
all-time low tracking numbers. Like he's doing far worse than Trump was
Well,
while in
most popular
office.
president in history, though.
Yeah, 81 million votes, people. This guy's more popular than
81 million.
more votes than Barack Obama.
It's insane. It's insane. Well, and it's not just, unfortunately, just only the I said just and only like three times. That's how much I want to emphasize. It's not only the Democrats, but also the evil Republicans, the rhinos that we have. Like who is this? Liz Cheney.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the J6 hearings, which don't seem to be going the way the reps hoped. I think the left saw this as their only chance to get people interested in back on the narrative that they want to push and to stop paying attention to prices at the pump, inflation, uh, food shortages, and everything else that's coming down the pipe at us right now. But so far, it's not going good for them. You've already had the Capitol Police Chief accidentally debunked one of the accusations they've been leveling against Trump and Republicans for a while, and that was that they were basically giving people that were involved that walked into the Capitol building on January 6th. Prior to that, certain Republican reps were giving them guided tours, and these were to serve as recon, so they knew where to go once they would, riot and have their little insurrection. Yes.
That doesn't sound right to me. Wait, so the theory is that there
So,
was
so with the,
insiders. Can you
yes.
explain that again for me for the lower IQ members of the audience, including myself? Could you
In,
just
in, in,
break
ca-
that down a little
in case there's
simpler?
any members of the mainstream media watching, I'll go through this one more time. Um, the so one of the accusations they've been leveling at Republicans is that certain reps like Madison Cawthorn, Marjorie Taylor Greene, I don't remember who else offhand, that prior to J6 that they gave guided tours to different constituents that then came back during January 6th and then led groups through the building. That this was like recon for the insurrection, that they already knew ahead of time that they were going to come in and storm the
Wow,
building.
that's
So
insane.
so that the accusation is that this was to help them so they knew how to be more effective. But then the chief of the Capitol Police said that they have no evidence to support this, and he didn't know
Yeah,
where the accusations were coming from. But he's not the only one that kind of has been debunking this.
they
Uh,
just make up things that are like, they're trying to frame this as like a treasonous act in the first place, and then they're trying to say that like Congress people had conspired to do this too. And we know why they're doing this because Marjorie Taylor Greene and Cawthorn and Gates and these other people, all of which have had these massive controversies come out about them all of a sudden this last year, interestingly enough, they all have, they have all been defending pretty consistently all of the January 6th prisoners, political prisoners. And I think they're doing this as a way to sanction them and be like, look, we're gonna put these people in prison for treason and insurrection, and then we're gonna say that you're their accomplice and you're gonna go to prison for the rest of your life. So back off. And I think this is almost like a warning shot to them, like, hey, what if we start making up theories about how you guys actually started this and you guys were the masterminds and the leaders behind this whole thing? And you could see it's kind of like freaky that this is what like third world nations do when they want to purge their governments. They'll just make up stories like this. It's kind of like the Night of the Long Knives where Hitler's like, oh, I think that like 300 people wanted to assassinate me, kill them all, right? And it's like, well, wait a minute. Like, how do we know that's true? Because the government said so. It's like, well, is there any proof? And it's like this with Democrats where they're like, hey, get rid of all these Republicans who are like fighting against us. They tried to overthrow the government and there's no one to challenge them.
yeah, exactly. And this is something that we've seen that already start to play out because I think wasn't it also Madison Cawthorn that was fighting a case that they wanted to say because of statements that he'd made related to the insurrection and giving a speech there or whatever, that was enough to strip him off the ballot in the next election. Was it him or was it a different rep?
I hadn't heard that, but that doesn't surprise me, and it may have been with him.
So he, whoever the rep was, they did lose this initial case, but if it was caught, they were going to go back and challenge it. Now, Cawthorn did get bumped out due to a primary, but again, so he's not going to be on the ballot anyway now. But using this tactic, using lawfare to try to strip people from, basically, they don't want the competition. They don't want to have to run against anybody. or they don't want anybody that can be out there to voice opposition to their ideas. I mean, this is a little unrelated, but I've seen now at least two examples, I think both in Colorado, where they're trying to prevent Republican candidates from showing up to debates. This just happened to a gentleman running in Colorado over the last week, where he shows up for a debate. I believe it was hosted by CBS. All of a sudden he shows up. When he gets there, he's like, oh, well, you have to wear a mask. You have to have your vaccine card. And these are not things that are required by Colorado state law. So they forced a reschedule of this debate. And that allows then a narrative to be generated that, oh, so-and-so didn't show to the debate. Now it has to be rescheduled. They must be scared. They don't want to debate XYZ candidate.
Right.
And it's all part of this game.
Yeah. And it's so sad to see that we have Republicans who are joining with the Democrats in these like shifty little games here that are undermining the national interest of like the American people or the people's best interest, which is exactly the whole point of what our Congress is supposed to do, is to be here to represent the will of us, the people.
Yeah, well, the left and the deep state they won't hesitate to weaponize government. And next story we're going to cover here, and this is a few days old, but FBI raids home of Michigan gubernatorial candidate Ryan Kelly for standing outside of the U.S. Capitol on J6. So this started just before the hearing started, so last week. He is not charged with any felonies. I believe it's a couple of misdemeanors, but they, show up at this guy's house, frog march him out, and makes a big story. And it's because this guy is leading the pack for the GOP. He's ahead in polling right now, and he'd be running against Gretchen Whitmer, and he's very outspoken on this and about the hearings being a sham, the election being a sham, and everything else. And they don't want to compete. Instead, they'd rather do this and use the media as a tool to plant the seed in everybody's mind that this guy's a criminal. He's part of a criminal conspiracy to undermine the integrity of our elections.
Yeah, and that's how propaganda works, is it starts very slow and then speeds up. Like, you need to plant those seeds and slowly water them over time. You can't just you can't from day one say, let's have like legalized pedophilia if you're a Democrat. You have to start with well, let's start with, divorce, and then let's go to gay marriage, and then let's relativize things. Love is love. Let's go to drag queens. Let's have them talk to kids, and let's have this put into the schools. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, why is age a restriction? Like, gender wasn't a restriction, and like class isn't a restriction, and like there's no other restrictions. Like, why is age one? And that's how they do it, very slowly and over time. And it's the same thing for framing people with political persecution. You have to do it slowly. You can't just start on day one and be like, hey, everyone, like, we're going to imprison everyone we disagree with. You have to do it very slowly, set examples of people one at a time. And this person arrested for standing.
Yeah.
What?
They know he didn't go into the building. I don't believe they're claiming any kind of incitement or anything like that. It's probably like the trespassing BS, which is where a lot of these other charges have been thrown out because property. Yeah. Well, the government's had to throw out a lot of these cases because they can't even prove there were signs up that said that the people couldn't go there.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So, in all likelihood, these charges are going to get dismissed, or he's going to fight them successfully, because we've already seen a few other people when they've bothered to not take the settlement offer, or plea deal. Sorry, that was the word I was looking for. Deal, that the charges end up getting dropped, because as soon as it gets in front of a judge, the judge takes a look at the evidence, and if they're an honest person, they know immediately the federal government has zero case, and they'll just toss it.
Yeah. Well, and it's concerning too, because federal for the cases that do go to court and that get that far, the feds have something like a 98% conviction rate. Like, it's not very easy to get away. The feds usually only take the cases to court that they think they can win. Now, that doesn't mean that they think the person is guilty. It just means they think they can win, right? So they may have certain evidence that you don't know about, or they may have certain tactics that they have. They may have witnesses that you don't know about, or false witnesses, or a number of things that they'll pull out in court. But that's why it's extremely concerning when we hear about people getting charged by the feds and being taken to court. We shouldn't think oh, well, if the feds are just doing that symbolically and nothing will happen. It's like the January 6th protesters, how many of them are still in captivity after 2 years now without being on charge for anything? And even if they did get charged, they would still be there for the 2 years, plus even longer. Plus, they would most likely be convicted.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this kind of gets to another big problem with this whole thing, with the way that our legal system works. One of the things I do agree with certain components on the left on, where the state will, throw the book at you. They will stack charges where you are essentially being charged multiple times for the same thing under different statutes. They make it so dangerous to lose that people will accept that plea deal even if they're
Right.
innocent, because they can't afford to fight the case. Or as we saw them feds do with like Brandon Straka or other people in this J6 thing, they keep stretching things out. They keep making you fly back and forth to DC for a hearing that they then file a continuance for. So it's a game. They know people don't have the financial, the money it takes just to fight something like this, or even finding an attorney now. Because if you're somebody that was a Trump supporter or whatever else, a lot of law firms won't even touch you. They don't want to beat you under a fair system, the same one that they would want to have to defend themselves under. They want to rig it against you.
Yeah, exactly. And you're so right about the fact that they'll stack charges up, and they'll do this sometimes not even because they think they can win every charge, but because every charge needs to take, another 5 months for the court's time to go through and assess, and all of that you have to pay for out of your own pocket. And like Mike said, even things like travel expenses, having to fly to DC because that's where the venue is, having to do these other things that cost quite a lot of money. All of this is to basically coerce the defendant into doing whatever the state wants. So it's like, hey, look, buddy, we're going to bankrupt you. We're going to make your family homeless, or you can go to prison for a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Which do you want? And they want this so they can set an example for the rest of the country, and that they can achieve their narrative. Look, he pled guilty. He admitted to being an insurrectionist. We didn't force him. We didn't torture him for a confession. He did it on his own.
Yeah, that's another thing too, especially with these J6 defendants, is like we've said numerous times, you have a lot of them that have been sitting in jail for over a year now for crimes that wouldn't even warrant 30 days in jail. So at some point, some of them do just break and be like, yeah, I'll sign whatever you want. Just let me the hell out of here. I'm tired of, living in this cell with roaches crawling all over me in the dark, getting, half an hour of yard time a few times a week.
Yeah, and they're like in solitary confinement, some of them and stuff, and being treated terribly. And there was abuse of the inmates there as well, of these like political captives. And I think I can't remember if it was MTG and Matt Gaetz that went there, but I remember a report being done, and they were like, the conditions here are like literally worse than Guantanamo Bay. Like if you were an ISIS terrorist in the U.S. who got caught in the middle of an actual like terrorist attack, you would be in better living conditions where you would have like a library and like private bathroom facilities and stuff, and not in isolation, not nearly as much as these people are. And you don't get any of that because you are a conservative, reactionary Trump supporter in this country, which the establishment fears even more than like ISIS.
Yeah, and then they're using COVID as an excuse too, to like not give people medical or dental care, or not give them haircuts.
Wow.
Yeah, I've heard stories too where like if they have a suit or whatever to wear for like a court appearance, it'll mysteriously get lost, so they have to show up for an arraignment or whatever, looking disheveled in a prison outfit instead of giving a chance to shower and dress nicely and appear in front of a judge. Yeah, because again, it's all to present an image.
Isn't it crazy how fast we can move into like a dictatorship of like these crazy leftists, where it's like these are the kind of things that you see in like North Korea when the guy comes shackled out and he's in his like orange jumpsuit and he's like, I'm sorry for what I did, please let me go. Like that's what we're getting in America today because of these Democrats and these globalists who run our nation. We have an occupied government right now. It's not run by the people. It's not even, frankly, run by our representatives, clearly, because if our Republican representatives could actually do their job, I would hope that they would stop this from happening. So either they're grossly incompetent and they're all liars and they're all cheaters and they're just taking our tax money and running with it, or there's other forces at play that don't allow them to do their jobs.
No, I think a lot of them are just rhinos, that they are unfortunately part of the Washington Uniparty. They want the status quo. They don't care that these conservatives are getting abused. They didn't like Trump, so they're not going to do anything to step out about it. They won't help out. They don't care. They see us as part of the enemy, just like they see elements of the left as part of the enemy. They want to keep their money going and their little scam going, and they want to keep their power. They don't care about what's good for the country or what's good for you and I or our listeners or anybody else.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And you said it well with the Washington Uniparty. It's like both parties serve the establishment, and the establishment is the status quo. And that is what both Republicans, mainstream Republicans, and Democrats want. And I would say mainstream Republicans and Democrats, because you have people on like the edges of both parties, whether it's like kind of like the Trumps or the DeSantises or even like the MTGs, Or on the other side of the Democratic Party, you have like the AOCs and Rashida Tlaibs who don't like the establishment. And within the Democratic Party, you have like these little battles between Nancy Pelosi and the old guard and AOC and these new like socialist kids. So I mean, you're seeing these radicals really shape what the future of American politics will be as the establishment shrinks in power. We have to ensure that the right wing radicals replace the mainstream, like Congress or whatever, the establishment, as opposed to the left wing radicals who will certainly take over if we don't counteract them. The way to avoid radicalism is not by running Mitch McConnell. I guarantee you, if it's AOC versus Mitch, we're done. The country's over.
Yeah, pretty much, because I think the turtle won't be. I mean, he wasn't that great while Trump was in office. I'll give him that he helped get judges through, and otherwise, I think he was perfectly useless the entire time of Trump's 4 years.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like these people just kind of sit around and then do the bare minimum, right? It's almost like, so I have like a terrible I tip when I go to restaurants, but I hate it. It's my least favorite thing to do. And I always debate people logically on this because I'm autistic. And I'm like, look, the waiter came 3 times. They took our order, they gave us our food, and then they gave us the check. If they did anything less than that, they would be fired for like total incompetence because like they cannot do any less than what they've done. Why do they deserve a tip when they're doing the bare minimum? And that's like with Mitch McConnell, where it's like it's the bare minimum. Like, yes, he approves some of this stuff, but it's like it's the bare minimum, Mitch. You got to do more. And that's why, like, on the show, both me and Mike, we advocate for like new people coming in who can actually like change the country as opposed to just kind of keep the status quo and do just enough not to get unelected.
Exactly. Somebody will actually put forward an agenda and advance it. You know, we brought up kind of the left, well, several times. The left is very good at using incrementalism to get things done, whether it's this LGBT agenda or other things that they push over time. They get it piece by piece, and this is something our side needs to learn, that we need for issues that are going to be a more difficult pill for the nation to swallow, or ones that right now there isn't popular support for, but we know once people understand the issue, we can get there. We need to learn how to put things in piece by piece so things actually get done and things actually move forward, because that also inspires your base to do more and to get out there and show up at rallies, to get out the vote, to do other things that we need our side to do that we suck at right now.
Yeah, well, speaking of getting out to vote and going to rallies, there was these 3 fellows that you can see on screen, all members of Antifa, allegedly, I believe, and they beat up 2 Marines during a BLM riot, was it, or an Antifa riot?
One of the two, I don't remember which, but yeah. And it was nice of whoever submitted their mugshots here to take their makeup off first. So they look like normal human beings, so the usual like 2-legged freak shows or 2-wheeled freak shows.
I know, Antifa bros seething. They don't get their like woman's underwear and makeup in prison. They have to have the uniformed jumpsuits and everything. They're like, this is too matchy for me. I need something to spice this up. Maybe a nice purple scarf. But anyways, these 3 people, you can kind of tell just by looking at them how dysgenic they look, that they are members of Antifa. Or even without the makeup, you can tell. The one guy has a pretty hardcore unibrow he's rocking. The other guy has weird eyebrows too. That's kind of a funny feature they have too. Anyways, nonetheless, putting aside the facial analysis of these people, we know they're a part of Antifa, and they beat up 2 Marines, I believe, who were like Mexican. And I heard, I don't know if this is true. Don't take this to the bank. Do you know, Mike?
Yeah, it was 2 Hispanic guys, the 2 Hispanic Marines that were beaten and robbed.
Yeah, and they were allegedly, this is what I heard, yelling like racial slurs at them because they are Hispanic, right? And I don't know if they were specifically Mexican or not, but they were using some slurs that are typically given to Mexican people while they were beating these 2 Marines up. And it's crazy because, needless to say, the Antifa people are like, racism is bad. And then they start, the 3 like white guys here on screen, or I don't know what they are, but they start beating up 2 Hispanic people, calling them like racial slurs. And it's like, you can't find me like a white supremacist in whatever city this took place in beating up Hispanic people, yelling racial slurs at them. It doesn't happen.
Yeah, we see this over and over again. Like there's plenty of videos from like, Portland or where they were going after the courthouse during the BLM riots of them shouting racial slurs at, what was his name? Officer Jackson, the guy that ended up getting like flashbanged and injured over there that did all the interviews afterwards. Black police officer, and they're shouting, the most despicable things you can think of at him. But it's a common thing because they want the police then to react negatively, so then it can be recast and framed a different way, and it furthers their narrative. This story is also just another example of the left weaponizing the courts and other things against us, like they are with the J6 tribunal or the J6 hearings right now, or the prisoners. They don't care to politicize some element of government and weaponize it against us, but our side will not do that.
Yeah, and that's the issue too. And these people are getting out there, and I guess we didn't even finish the story. They were each charged with felonies for like
Yes.
I believe it was aggravated assault or something like that. And all of them, all the charges that is, have been dropped on all these individuals because of the Soros-backed Philadelphia district attorney.
Yes. Yeah, and it was robbery. It was numerous felonies for each of them. And again, they just threw it out.
Wow.
And we've seen this before. I mean, the two lawyers that firebombed a police car during the BLM riots in New York, they had their sentences cut in half. And I heard somebody say yesterday, I haven't bothered to check to verify this, that they may be out of jail now. They may have gotten their sentences reduced far enough that they are now out of jail and just have probation. But this is on another podcast I was listening to last night. Yeah, but if that's the truth, that's insane, because this is, again, like, this is attempted murder. At the very least, these people should be doing 20 to life.
Yeah. So like go back one slide really quick, and we'll do a compare and contrast. This man stood outside of the Capitol. He just stood standing. You know, the action that is not sitting. He stood outside the Capitol, is being investigated by the FBI and is being brought up on charges. Next slide, please. Then you have these guys, multiple felony charges all dropped after assaulting U.S. soldiers. And then, in addition to that, you have other cases where you have like Antifa and BLM attorneys, lawyers, going out and firebombing police cars, trying to light police on fire and burn them to death. And they serve all but a few months in prison. And that's it. Isn't that insane how our justice system is that corrupt?
No, it really is. That, you know, people say it's a two-tiered system. They're not joking anymore. It used to be, you know, I think like 20 years ago, when stuff like that happened, it was more the exception, not the rule. Like, oh yeah, this politician didn't get charges, or this relative, or this wealthy person.
Right.
But it wasn't like an everyday thing, where now it's like literally every case. Like, your political affiliation and your beliefs are taken into account, and that's weighed against you before you're even brought to trial.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Like, you brought up a good point. Like, there used to be the cases of like, who was it? Jack Kennedy or whatever, John Kennedy's JFK's brother, and it's like, yeah, he murdered someone, but he got off the hook because, like,
Ted Kennedy,
you know, he is the brother of the president, and he wasn't he like a governor or House of Representative member himself or something?
Yeah, are you talking Teddy the Fish Kennedy, the one that?
Yeah, I think so. One of the Kennedys.
There's been several of them with charges on different things.
Whichever one killed the woman by drowning her in the car.
Yeah,
that one kind of got off scot-free. Yeah. So, I mean, but, you know, you expect in rare circumstances like the justice system to fail because of certain things, like same with like the Maxwell situation, the Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein situation. You're like, okay, these are like trillionaires or whatever, multiple billionaires, and they know all these political people. Like, she's getting off the hook, like, we know that. But when it comes to these like street level, like, people who are attacking police and burning down business, when we're talking about like arsonists and people who commit aggravated assault and robberies and things like this, like, there really shouldn't be any excuse, and there should be excuses for the top people, but you kind of expect that. The bottom rungs now are even being let out, and simply for ideological reasons.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes before, like when it was a case where somebody that was like a prominent celebrity or somebody that was connected, where a case didn't go the way we think it should, it is because of what the jury sees, and that's what they decide. And us in the public, we're getting information.
Yeah, like OJ.
Yeah, exactly. Like if you were to sit on,
maybe not like OJ. I still think OJ was good, but sorry, go on.
Yeah, well, I've heard that that's one example, but I don't remember specifically what it is, where the public was aware of things the jury was not.
Okay.
Yeah, so sometimes like us on the outside, we get one perception of a person's guilt or not, but then you find out the jury, well, they didn't hear any of these facts because, for one, you know, the evidence was tainted, or XYZ, some reason it wasn't presented to them in the same way, and that's why they come out with the verdict they do. I know a couple of these books about, you know, different major trials. That's something that a jury member will discuss afterwards, that, oh, well, if we were made aware of this fact, yeah, that probably would have swung some votes and things would have gone the other way. So
right. It makes me wonder, like, should we try to take as much human element out of like our justice system as possible? Because I was thinking about this the other day, like, our justice system should reflect like the will of God, like something objective. Even if you don't believe in God, it should be objective and something that humans don't change and tamper with depending on how we feel on whatever day. It should be objective. But if us humans are imperfect and we're emotional and we make irrational decisions, and that's something every human does, should we really like put a bunch of human elements in a court system? Because with the O.J. Simpson case, I read a book and it was really interesting on how you should frame things in an emotional way and come up with these kind of like, it was actually a business book on creating like slogans, which sounds kind of funny, but it has important implications for politics as well. And he used O.J. Simpson as an example, and he said the sentence, if the glove does not fit, you must acquit.
Yeah.
That meant more to the jury than like the 3 weeks of evidence introduced by the prosecution. Just that one sentence, because it rhymed, it was catchy, it was easy to remember, and that's what the jury went into the deliberation room thinking, like, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense, right? So when we, but that's a way that like human emotion can be altered to find an otherwise guilty person innocent in a court system. So it's almost like, should we have like robot judges and juries in the future? I don't know, because as of today, I think right wingers would be better off with that, but I don't know if that has other implications that we wouldn't want to see.
Yeah, because I think it also could go the other way. Because at the end of the day, too, I do sometimes want jury nullification. Like if it's an unjust law or unjust charges or something else, I do want that jury to still have the ability to basically just dismiss the case and be like, you know what, we're not going to charge this person that's clearly guilty of what you're trying to convict them of, but because we think it's unjust charges, we're just going to throw it out.
Yeah, well, the unfortunate thing is like, excuse me, I'm not good at drinking water. It's something I struggle with.
Yeah, I have a drinking problem, just not the kind,
I'm definitely going to be using that one. Whenever I go on someone's like show, like on Blaze or whatever, I always choke on my water. I don't know why that is. Anyways, if you look at places like DC where like 94% of like the public or 95% voted for like Hillary Clinton, and like not even like 5% of them voted for Trump, but 5% just like either voted for the Green Party or Libertarian Party or the Republican Party. Like you're looking at a case where no one on the jury is going to be like unbiased, basically. You're looking at a case when, unfortunately, the nullification stuff would be helpful if like you or I were on the jury and we'd be like, okay, this is like a stupid trespassing like charge that you're making up to be insurrection. Like, no, I'm not finding this person guilty no matter what. Screw you. But in DC, like that would never happen, which is a huge issue. Because like ideally, you're right. Like we do want like a human element, but we're dealing with demons now, and I feel like robots are better than demons. Although humans are better than robots, but robots are better than demons. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wish I could remember who it was that was talking about this, but it was some public figure, and they were actually seated on a grand jury in New York. Somebody that determines charges going forward, and they convinced the other people that were on the grand jury with them for several cases that for like simple like marijuana possessions, things like that, where the person had no prior charges, no anything, and the state was trying to sling this just giant, put them in jail for 5 years for possession. They convinced the people on the grand jury to all strike this down, like, nope, don't move forward, to just nullify the charges. And by the end of the day, like the prosecutor's just furious with them because they figured out who it was that was shifting the jury and they couldn't get their charges forward. But they're like, well,
I think that's like super illegal, isn't it? You can't tell jury members they can do that, can you?
So it's sort of, I've heard different things on this, that like technically, that you're supposed to determine the case by the law, but at the same time, you can just state that, well, we don't. I'm trying to think of a good way to put this. That we don't think your charges meet what the crime.
Right. Yeah. Like a jury can vote any way, and you can't be punished for voting a certain way or whatever, or finding a person to. But I thought it was illegal to tell jury members to do that, because then everyone, the defense could just be like, oh, you guys don't have to vote guilty, even if he is, just so you know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is, and I don't know how they walked around it, if they just did it anyway, or maybe they just didn't tell them that's what they were doing and convinced them that these are crap charges and we should vote no on it, never mention jury nullification or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, on the topic of jury, there's no transition. Let's just go to the next slide. I can't think of anything to go
I've got a perfect one.
So,
it isn't just the left corrupting the courts. They will weaponize anything they have control over the right. California pet store bans Second Amendment supporters from adopting animals, faces backlash. So this pet store threatened to sue any NRA supporters for fraud if they tried to adopt one of the animals anyway. We do not support those that believe the Second Amendment gives you the right to buy an assault weapon. Shelter Pet Hope Shop stated on their website. If your beliefs are not in line with ours, we will not adopt a pet to you.
Can you do that legally? Or is that like, I don't know if there's like issues of like freedom of association and stuff or like Civil Rights Act. Can they do this?
So this is again like one of the problems with the left and their total inconsistency. So when a right-wing baker doesn't want to make a wedding cake for a gay couple, it's a
Yeah.
huge uproar. But if you're a an animal shelter and you don't want to adopt give a puppy to someone that supports the Second Amendment, that's just fine. That's I'm sure getting praised.
Right, yeah, because like if there was like a giant like gay lobby or something, let's say, and a Christian baker, let's say, said like because you obviously brought up the example that happened in real life with the gay baker, but I think some people would be like, oh well, this is an organization, not your life or whatever, you know what I mean? But in the same case, it's like, well, if the baker said, are you a part of the Gay Straight Alliance or whatever, and they were like, yes, we are, and he's like, not helping you, goodbye, and then threatened to sue them if they did lie, like I don't think that would fly, right?
I don't know.
Or
So
maybe. I guess with the Baker, wasn't it found constitutional though that he could do that?
I believe they're going after more charges against him now, or maybe it's a different case.
Who knows?
Because well, one of them just went to the Supreme Court or was just decided by the Supreme Court. He did win his initial cases twice. The same with there was a florist too that was got wrapped up in all this that didn't want to do flowers for a trans
Gay
wedding,
wedding
I
or
think.
something.
Yeah, I think this one is even worse than like yeah, I think it was a trans couple. Um, but
Wait,
yeah,
like a male to female and a
I
female to
don't want to
male?
know. I don't.
Because
It
that might
just
be better.
yeah,
That
yeah,
would still just be at the end of the day, a man and a woman, you know?
yeah, exactly. It's just they're confused about which one's which.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's just, two mentally ill people, but
yeah,
hey, it's at least at the end of the day, it's still a man and a woman.
yeah. Oh, they should just have
I've
the
actually heard
ceremony.
cases of that though, where it's like a trans man dates a trans woman, and I'm like, why did you guys go to all this trouble? Like whatever.
Yeah, I've cut video from something of that of some like a trans couple where the guy was playing the girl and the girl was playing the guy and then they had a kid on the way and that's what the whole video is about.
Yeah, and then like that's where you hear about these stories of like pregnant men or whatever, and
Yeah.
it's like this is like the absolute most insane thing. I see that on Snapchat all the time or on the Discover tab. It's like the most degenerate, filthy place on the internet for social media websites, and it's like, oh, this man was impregnated by his wife, and it's like two trans people, and they look like absolutely like hideous and like terrifying, and it's just so disturbing to see what our country has devolved into.
Yeah, and the fact that it's celebrated, it's not just something that happens on the periphery that you bump into every once in a while. It's that this is celebrated and brought forward to everybody. If you don't appreciate it, you're a bigot.
Yeah, and it is brought, to the attention of everyone and promoted, and that's the issue is like you have these big tech companies who do promote all of this degeneracy. And again, like, I think maybe some of it is like shock value, but there's also like I would imagine in like business school they teach you like don't be controversial, you're going to lose a bunch of customers. And I feel like, for most of history, that's how business was done and it worked. But now, because we have like this crony capitalist system where monopolies run our entire economy, it's like they can get away with saying the most outrageous stuff. And to me, it's less about them trying to make money or do good business and more about them trying to push an ideological agenda, like we discussed before with record labels.
Yeah, and this is kind of an example too, where is if somebody does try to sue this well, not adoption agency, I was about to call it the yeah, animal adoption place, that there will be some, the gay lobby or the ACLU or somebody will take up their case. Whereas you had the exact opposite with the baker. They did have
Yeah.
people from the ACLU and the gay lobby and everything else siding with the couple against this bakery, and the state then did too. They piled on. They didn't just go after the guy once; they went after him a second time for another violation.
That's terrible. And
Yeah.
like totally bankrupted the guy too. He had to shut down his business, I think I heard. And it's shameful to hear because they go after all these people so often and so much. And did you want to discuss this last slide quickly before we head out?
Yeah. Um, so, I mean, some people on the right will push back. I don't know if anybody saw the smear campaign against Lauren Boebert, but a left-wing super PAC, American Muckrakers, started circulating a story about her that she had been an escort or a prostitute, had had abortions and everything else. But they tried to frame it in a way that essentially when they started posting these memes or this information about it, said, hey, if this sounds like something you think Lauren Boebert would do, then you should share this across your social media. They didn't come right out and state it like, this is a fact, we have evidence, this is what we want to talk about. It's just to circulate the idea and get it out there, make people discuss it. And she is actually going to sue them for defamation, even though this is like supposed to be their like clever workaround on the law. Hopefully the case,
and that's not how
forward.
it works either.
Yeah.
You can't say like, like it's if something is untrue and you said it and it harms the person. There's only 3 steps to it. It doesn't matter if you say, if this sounds like something you think would be true, you should share it. That doesn't actually negate your legal responsibility or whatever.
Yeah, and it really is sick that that's the approach they take. And of course, this thing, took off the bat. I saw that it was up to like 2 million shares yesterday, and I'm sure it's gone further than that now, unless this muckrakers place has gotten scared and started to pull down this information because they know a lawsuit's coming. She's already talking to attorneys and said she's moving forward with it.
Right. Well, luckily people are pushing back, and Lauren is pushing back on this and suing for defamation. That's what we need to do. We need to be fighting back and punching left. Get it? The name of the show, which you can find on punchingleft.com. Please check out us on all different platforms, especially Telegram and Odyssey. That's where we'll be uploading our videos and giving announcements for the shows over on Telegram and Odyssey. Please find us there at punchingleft.com. With all that said, thank you guys for joining us here today. We will be back here as always on Tuesdays and Thursdays. God bless each and every one of you guys, and take care.
Yeah, thanks again. Watch that Telegram feed. We're going to have some announcements on there very soon for some other projects that AJ and I are working on. I don't want to disclose too much now, but we'll have a big announcement definitely within the next week, probably over the weekend. So thanks again, and we'll see everybody soon.